Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Literature for Equality Project. I am Hani Ahmad.
And I am Diana Yong. This is a series of 8 book discussions that circle around the issue of gender equality. And today we're back on home ground with our own myths and contemporary tales with Principal Girl, edited by Sharifah Aishah Osman and Tutu Dutta.
The Principal Girl, Feminist Tales from Asia, features stories of bright and heroic women and girls drawn from Malaysia, Singapore, and the Asian diaspora that underlies the rich and diverse cultural heritage of the two countries. All 18 stories in this anthology emphasize female agency and privilege the strength and wisdom of young girls and women over conventionally idealized traits such as beauty, obedience, conformity, and passivity, so frequently depicted in traditional male-centric folk tales. Of these, 8 tales are based on or inspired by Asian folklore and well-known female cultural icons, while 10 are original stories with contemporary settings, drawn from sources as diverse as the Mahabharata and Sejarah Melayu to Iban and Kadazan folklore. Apart from reimagined tales of legendary female figures like Hang Lipo, Princess of Mount Ledang, Draupadi, Queen Vishpala, and Chet Siti I Cambodia, and mythical creatures like the Phoenix and the Gedambai, readers will also meet the crime-fighting teenager Surya, the scholar and philanthropist Lily Poe, and the beauty queen Eve, who learns the true meaning of embodying the spirit of Huminodun, among many others just as dauntless. The prose and stories are easy to grasp and showcase the writings of both new and established authors from Malaysia and Singapore. Hence, there is ample room for further reading as we hope that this little anthology will expose young people to more regional female writers.
So, we have talked about hard-hitting feminist issues and gender stuff in some of our other episodes, and we thought that this episode can bring us back to why Diana and I are such avid readers and why we have a podcast in the first place. We both love storytelling.
And stories matter. When we were growing up, it was hard to find what people now call own voices stories, and stories that center around a female protagonist. What was your reading experience like, Honey?
Well, I remembered really loving books like Nancy Drew and Mallory Towers, Little House in the Big Woods, Anne of Green Gables, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I mean, these are some of the books I remembered, mainly because the protagonist was a girl like me, my age at that time. And I remember that a lot of other books, most of them are boys. And I love those adventure type stories, but there wasn't as many adventures for girls. You know, boys do get up to more interesting stuff. as we've established in our other episodes. And even in our own folklore, I felt that the stories were very, very sporadically about princesses. There were some damsels here and there. I remembered more the stories of people like Pak Pandir or Sang Kancil or Badang, you know, not necessarily female characters. Let me ask the question back to you, Diana. What were some of the books that resonated with you when you were growing up, and how many of them had a girl at the center of the book?
Many of my early childhood books were the kind of generic fairy tales, mythology, Enid Blyton, the classic adventure stories, right? It's kind of sad, really, when you think about it. It's a struggle for me to really name too many female characters there that I would have looked up to. I do recall really admiring Portia from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, because I thought Portia was amazing because she got to be the savior in her own story. In fantasy, though, you do actually get some quite good female characters like Mara the Coma, Pogara the Sorceress. Mara especially, I really enjoyed reading Janie Wirt's and Raymond E. Feist's Empire trilogy, because she was this character that, like she had to act within this quite constraining kind of Asian-inspired kind of culture, but she figured out how to do it and still become the center of a story and have her own agency. But, these were kind of like exceptions rather than norm.
Yeah. Today, readers are so lucky because today, if you think about YA fantasy or even contemporary books, there are so many female protagonists. In fact, if you don't have a female protagonist, people are almost saying that you're old-fashioned, right? I mean, people are okay, like, why aren't you not writing about a female protagonist? So I think readers today have so much to choose from. Plus, there's a lot more own voices kind of stories. But let's get back to our folklores. Why is this collection of tales called Principal Girl, Diana?
So I guess principle in the sense that, first in order of importance, right? And this context means that they're in the center of the story. So in a nutshell, it's reframing something to put the feminine voice in the middle. In the previous episodes, we've talked about how damaging this can be when stories that we hear from childhood are internalized, like stories that only show boys to be the ones to do all the action. Boys are the ones that save girls, and girls can't do anything for themselves. In a collection of stories like this, which puts the girl at the center of the story, it's not just about making the girl the hero, I think. It's also about making female characters that make choices of their own and able to explore their own agency.
Yeah, here's the thing. In an article in LitHub, it says, unless you're a queen or some noble woman of note, not much would be known of you if you died 200 years ago. Poor women rarely make it into historical records. Women have been about 50% of the population, but only occupy around 0.5% of recorded history. Is it not terrifying that centuries of female experiences have been considered too uninteresting, trivial, domestic, or submissive to sustain 80,000 words? You know, when you put that into perspective, right, it's quite shocking, isn't it? It's true, right? We are 50% of the population, but the stories about us is less than 0.5%.
I have this penchant for historical fiction that centers around women. It's just something soothing to be reminded that, like generations of women have existed, have thrived, even though we haven't been told about them. And we just forget that women have been the backbone of much of history, because without women, we wouldn't have children, and we wouldn't be raising them to grow up to be strong people as well. So I think this is one way of thinking about how important it is that we put back the women's perspective into history. It's one of the good things about a lot of the fiction that's been put out now. Most of the historical fiction that I do pick up, and there's tons of it now, it's all centering around women's voices, and a lot of them are actually very ordinary women, rather than just like the kings and the queens and the people who did great things. Because ordinary people, like what we were saying when we were talking about Circe, ordinary people can make a change and make a difference as well.
Ever so often, you always read these days about an author writing something with a female protagonist and saying that their extensive research has shown how different it is. Like, we keep thinking that we're living in an enlightened age. And yeah, I suppose we do. But in the past, there have been so many of these other women and other people who have actually done amazing things. They were just not recorded. Like, the stories that are actually in your folklores and fairy tales are basically talking about women as tragic or bloody villains, or the third type, where women are just plot points. They are kidnapped, chased, married, or raped, and they are kind of like the inciting incident of the tale. For instance, Putri Gunung Ledang, she's a witch and she's malicious because she's telling a vain king to take his own son's blood. Bawang Putih, Bawang Merah, evil stepmother, evil stepsister, and then Putih gets saved by a prince. Even historical figures like Tuan Teja had very little agency, used as a pawn by royalty and by Hang Tuah. We've always talked about this, Diana, that it's high time that we ourselves do retellings or reimagines of our own historical figures and fairy tales.
Which is why it's so important that women are the ones who start talking about these things and start thinking about, like, how were these stories told? And why is it that we actually need to make an effort to collect stories that are told from the point of view of a girl?
Yeah, so let's chat about some of the stories in Principal Girl. This is a collection of short stories, so if you want to read them all, you can definitely get a copy at Gerak Budaya. But we're going to pick a couple of stories just to kind of set the conversation going, right? So it is an own voices story. So if you're from this part of the world, it concerns Malaysian girls and women. So for instance, The Girl on the Mountain by Prita Samasaran is loosely based on Putri Gunung Ledang. But in her story, the princess actually gives the king a piece of her mind that later becomes the kernel for his own change in attitude.
The girl knew nothing of money, yet understood the exact value of every precious thing. That was why, when a young warrior came to tell her that his king wished to marry her, she folded her arms and studied him. For she knew how the pretty manners of gentlemen could charm the cleverest girls into a kind of submission. The truth is, she needed no guardians. You must make me a rainbow that stretches from your king's palace to this mountain. Then you must bring me a mountain peacock pheasant so tame it will eat from my hand. 7 live butterflies, 1 in each color of the rainbow, who will perch along the length of my arm. 7 seawater fish from an underground river, a bat who hunts by day and sleeps in her cave by night, a lock of hair belonging to the last woman for whom your king gave up his life, and a promise from him that he will not clothe me in gold-threaded sonket and beadwork and cage me. I must still be able to climb these mountains barefoot, to bathe in the waterfalls and eat honey from the honeycomb. Only then will I marry your king. The king was a proud and vainglorious man who did not know how to admit he was beaten. When he heard the whole list of demands, he threw back his head and laughed heartily. What I will give her will be even better than what she has asked for. So bedazzled will she be by the splendor of my gifts that she will fall to her knees and beg for my favor. About her freedom, though, he said nothing.
I think that line about her freedom, though, he said nothing. That's really something that is so illustrative, right? Because it really shows that possessing the girl from the mountain that's the point. Like, he doesn't even know her. All he knows is that there was this girl in the mountain, and she probably has this reputation as being something really exotic. Like, she's like a rare orchid, this really special fruit that you can only get once 100 years or something like that. So he just wants to own her and display her as a sign of wealth and power.
Yeah, because nobody else can have her. I just keep thinking, like, bringing this in a modern context, right? I think a lot of people have experienced having unwanted attention from men. So here's the man that comes to you, and they pursue you, right? And then they think they know what you want. And so she asked him for impossible things, like, get the hint, I don't want to be with you. But no, what he does was that he completely plunges his kingdom into poverty in order to build her this, like, bridges of gold and stuff like that. And it makes me think about toxic relationships, about a man thinking that he knows what's best for a woman, handling a woman. In this circumstance, he's a man that grew up around people who has never denied him anything. And let's face it, like, men have always been in a position of privilege throughout history, even in our society, that sometimes it's hard for them to think about it in another person's perspective. So, I feel, as you were saying, she's a trophy wife lah.
It just reminded me of the story that I heard, like, I think it was last week. There was this viral video going around of this woman in China. She was just kneeling on the ground and kowtowing to this guy in front of her. And she was basically begging and pleading with him to stop pursuing her, because he had been coming after her for about 5 years. And no matter what she did, he just wouldn't get the message that she wasn't interested. People were commenting on it and saying, she should at least give him a chance, as if she was just doing it to make his life hard. But never mind that she obviously felt harassed and distressed by this kind of, like, insistent pursuit. So often people think of women who turn men down as playing hard to get. And as we can see, given how old a story like Putri Gunung Ladang is, this idea that women are playing hard to get goes all the way back to ancient times.
Absolutely. It's the idea that women want to be wooed. Women want to be lavish with things and stuff like that. But most of the time, they just want to be treated as people and to be respected for their opinions and to be respected for what their own needs and desires. So I thought it was kind of an interesting twist to the story, where you look at it in the way that you're saying. It's like, please just leave me alone. And this king is like going, but I'm a king. How can you not want to marry me? I can give you the world. What's really nice at the end is that she really does give him a piece of her mind.
"Foolish girl!" he thundered. But as the days passed, he became quiet and thoughtful. Of course, he was king, and the king does not learn overnight to put himself in the shoes of peasants and slaves. Hardly anyone notices the tiny changes in him at first, that when he issued orders to his slaves or his queens, the pauses in his speech were more frequent and longer, that his attention seemed divided when his tax collectors read him their lists, of which villagers had not paid their taxes in full, that he sometimes sighed to himself for no reason at all, looking here and there listlessly as though he were searching for something he did not expect to find. When daughters were born to his wives, he allowed, nay, encouraged them to read and learn, to sit in the audience and listen to the greatest scholars of the land. Toward the end of his days, the king's heart visibly softened.
What do you think of the ending of this story, Diana? Before we move to the next tale.
I think it's kind of ironic in a way that, people often dismiss fairy tales as stories that are too unrealistic to be true. Your gold doesn't come out from under hills, like people don't just transform into beautiful women overnight like that. So, but the thing is, a story like this, where you see people actually able to change and grow for the better, it feels even less believable.
I know, right? It feels like, is it really that easy to change a person's mind? Especially a guy that's so arrogant and so stubborn, right? But I guess that's where the hope is in this story, is that sometimes you just need somebody to see you, to kind of like call you out. I think this brings back to our previous conversations about girls calling people out on the things that they say, because they might not know that this has hurt people, or they've just been conditioned to just think that what they say matters. That maybe there is a rallying call here, is that you can call somebody's nonsense out. And maybe if it's just done at the right time, at the right place, at the right part of that person's life, it might actually lead to some positive change. We can only hope, right, Diana?
In this case, it's not just about changing your personal beliefs and perspectives. It's also the fact that he could overlook the way social conditioning has taught him how to treat women. He's always been taught that women are property, kind of like they're things that you can own. They're things for you to achieve and conquer, and that's still a problem in today's society. So that's something that we all need to work on.
Which is why stories like this should also be read by boys. Just because it's called Principal
Definitely.
Girl, don't feel upset that it's not called Principal People, because so many stories out there already centers the boy experience. But it is good that everybody reads books like this, like it's a good start for the conversation. Okay, let's shift to our spooks, to our hantus. Take the Pontianak, for example. So many of our hantus seem to be victimized women who suffered loss, and then they come back as vengeful beings in the next. One of my favorite stories in here is by Julia Uy, the Mistress of Darkness. It's called Surya and the Supernatural Sleuths. So this is a girl who can literally see dead people, or I suppose supernatural beings. It starts out with girls who are disappearing around this town, and people are blaming a Pontianak.
They blame it on the Pontianak. But I knew it wasn't her. She would never do a thing like that. She would never kidnap an 11-year-old girl and keep her hidden for no reason. She told me she only drank blood from animals she asked permission from. Animals that were strong and healthy that could offer her some nourishment. Still, I had to visit the Pontianak who lived inside the 100-year-old tree near the lake gardens before the townspeople chopped it down out of fear and anger. Yes, I can see them. I could see things ever since I was 5. Things people called ghosts, jinns, toyos, hantus, and all the other supernatural beings from folklore. I have no idea why there are so many different kinds. They themselves don't know what caused them to be that way, and why they are wandering the earth. Frightful as they are, I'm actually more frightened of humans.
You know, reading this story, it kind of like it makes you really reflect on how, just like girls and women, ghosts and spooks are kind of marginalized. And so it's really refreshing to see what Julia Oy did in the story, which is to foreground that we fear ghosts and spirits when really it's humans that are the most fearsome monsters.
Hantu kepala
You know, so
hitam,
many
they say. You should fear the hantu kepala hitam, not the hantu yang tak ada
Exactly,
kaki.
yeah. I mean, like, so many ghost stories are really like tragic stories, right? Like, don't Pontianaks have another name, Matianak? Because they are spirits of women who die in childbirth.
Yes, yeah.
I found a reference for one Malay scholar who says that the Pontianak isn't able to be a mother in a culture where reproduction is essential to a woman's identity. So she disrupts Malay ideals of femininity. And isn't that really interesting? Because, you know, like Pontianaks prey on men. They're out resembling beautiful women until they turn around and then they're like fearsome creatures and stuff like that. There are a lot of traditions of Pontianak actually being like saviors of women who are being abused and stuff like that. It's this whole idea that after death, you've transcended the bounds of culture, where you're not constrained to just being a mother or whatever. You can actually become a hero, but only if you die.
And die horrifically as well. That's quite an interesting thing that you brought up, because I remember when reading this story, I thought, how can you blame the disappearing of girls on a Pontianak? Don't you know you're supernatural creatures? Because Pontianaks do not steal children. Pontianaks
Right.
basically come after men, like horrible men. But when you bring it up in that way, maybe it does kind of make sense. If there are women who cannot have children, then maybe that's why people believe that they would steal children. Because when I was reading it, I was like going, wow, people so stupid lah. They don't know their own supernatural creature, is it? Right? But but I think why I really like this story is because it reminded me of like a little Nancy Drew. When I was growing up, I would love to have read a series of books on Surya and her supernatural allies solving cases. All I had was Nancy Drew. Julia, please do a series of books on Surya. It was so nice to read a story about a little girl who follows clues.
And she's persistent, and she's like, you know, she knows that she can do something to help, right? Which is something that we're always discouraging girls from doing.
Or you're basically telling them it's too dangerous. Like one of my favorite parts of the story is that she comes into this creepy ass building, and then with relief, she finds some toyos. Do you know what I mean? Like she's thinking she's going to find like a mass murderer there, right? But when she looked and when she found some toyos, she's like, oh, adik, thank God. I can ask you for some direction. So it's that idea again that, as you were saying, right? Like how supernatural creatures are also marginalized. And, you know, like somebody who knows how it's like to be marginalized would recognize that kinship in them, right? That also brings us to this question about, should all stories that empower women have to paint women in a good light all the time? Because putting the girl at the center of a story, but also showing her as all good and all powerful, like Captain Marvel, also does a bit of a disservice. Because girls need stories of other girls making decisions, making mistakes, going through doubts, and not giving up.
We still want to hear women's stories about how they overcame those challenges. We do want to hear about what they were thinking and they were doing, and why, despite all the difficulties that they had, why do women persist? Why do women go on? And how do they quietly have their own way of taking power? We can actually understand about the past when we look back and look at the role that women played in them. So that's something that I think that is an interesting way that we can rewrite history without actually making women into heroes or whatever, but just allowing them to have a space in the story.
When you were saying that, it reminds me of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, when her friend Helen says, "We are born to suffer and endure." And it just sounds like in the past, women suffered and endured. Not that we want to go all grim, okay? Because this brings us to the end of part 1. And in part 2, we'll go into some of the contemporary tales in this book and talk a bit more about our own takeaways.
So this is part 2 of our discussion on Principal Girl. Listen on.
Right, we are talking Principal Girl about putting girls at the center of the story and how stories are important to bear witness to the human condition, but also how women characters deserve to be fleshed out properly. This has always been my pet peeve as a scriptwriter that even in our local movies, TV shows, etc., the portrayal of women are quite dismal. Not all, but a huge percentage of it. Many are still stuck on the very surface characterization of women. Evil stepmother, young, virginal, ingenue. So the complexities that we are looking for is not there. And often when I'm writing a female character, I'm always asked to make something more straightforward. I mean, it's the duality of people that is interesting, right? But it's like, okay, for instance, like if she is good, she cannot also have bad thoughts, right? Like she might be good and noble, but she cannot steal. I have been in a writer's room where they say that, oh, the villain cannot be a woman in headscarf. Cannot, huh? Because that
Right.
completely goes against what you think a woman in headscarf should be. Like a woman in headscarf, you can't
Right.
make her smoke, yeah? I know that this seems very petty, but it makes the people that you create for television or whatever less real because people are not one thing. So, you want to take a look at some contemporary tales then, Diana, after my tirade?
So, one of the stories that we're talking about next is The Gamble, which is one of the contemporary stories in the collection by Sharmila Ganesan. So, it's a story about Draupadi, who thinks of herself as just one of the boys. But one day they make it obvious that she's not quite the same as the five other boys in her friend group.
The day she first walked into her class with Beam and Aj, then sat next to Yo Lee at their usual corner, she realized she was being silently judged. Whispers began making rounds that she was Yo Lee's girlfriend. Then got supplanted by rumors of Aj and Beam fighting over her. During her first week in school, none of the girls in class approached her. And the few she tried speaking to answered curtly and hurried off. Other boys clustered amongst themselves, mostly ignored her, but sometimes when she's walking on her own, she would hear insolent chirps and whistles from certain groups. Even the teachers were suspicious. They tried to sit her with a group of girls during lessons, and some teachers would stop her when she was with one of the boys to ask where they were going. Over time, most of them seemed to get used to it. Students occasionally spoke to her in class. The girls in her after-school volleyball club included her in their jokes. But few schoolmates became anything more than casual friends. Some continued to mock her, calling her names like common property and free and easy. She didn't mind because she had Yoli and the rest.
Well, the double standards, right? I have been one of the boys. Like, I grew up with a lot of male cousins. Then one fine day, and I think this is when everybody kind of hits puberty a little bit, they started treating me differently in a weird kind of way. Like, suddenly, like, there were games that they didn't want me to be part of. They tease me in a different way than they tease my other cousins. And I was really confused for a while. And reading this, I kind of felt for her, like here she is having good friends who are boys, but yet one day she will enter a class and people are starting to gossip about her. Because, this is when you hit puberty, you start having sexual awakening and you started seeing girls as someone other, not part of the gang.
What gets me about the story is that there's really no such thing as platonic friendship in most people's minds, right? And the way men and women can relate to each other, the only way it seems is if they're dating or something. This idea that when men and women must only relate in a very specific way, this is an idea that children can absorb from adults around them, and they absorb this from a very early age. So it's something that we've ingrained into our youth, and that's something that we have to be aware of. It really makes my blood boil. For instance, when people they put on babies' clothes, sometimes they even have messages like, "Dad says I'm not allowed to date." Like, seriously, that's a baby. There's videos of people telling their preschoolers, "Do you have any boyfriends at school? which one's your boyfriend? You're not allowed to have any boyfriends. And they're like, oh, no, I'm going to have at least one. Like, what are you teaching these young children? To think about boys, something, an object to pursue rather than just as a friend. It just seems to me that so much of this pressure it comes from this idea that we cannot make friends across genders.
Yeah, but then you also hear words like when a girl is being teased, they always say that, oh, why is this boy so nasty to me? Oh, it's because he likes you. Again, we're talking about like unwanted attention, right? And it's almost like her opinions or her feelings are not valid. It's just kind of dismissed. And it also kind of like put the responsibility in the girl's court. It's like she is the one that's reacting unfavorably to this. She is the one that is overreacting, as opposed to actually reprimanding the person giving the unwanted attention and saying, this is not how you treat somebody.
She felt on display. She automatically straightened the skirt of her turquoise pinafore and pulled her blouse sleeves down. It was only the sight of her friends that encouraged her to keep going forward. She tried catching Yoli's eyes as she came closer, but he kept them firmly on the road. Beam was standing a few steps away, fists tightly clenched while staring at Yoli. Confused, Jaupadi sought out Aj, who met her questioning gaze briefly before looking quickly down at the ground. Nabil and Sahar crouched behind him, staring at the grass. As she reached Yoli, "Did you guys tell Dash to bring me here?" she asked. There was a long silence. A loud laugh burst out behind her. "Actually, I told Dash to get you here," Drew said. Draupadi kept her expression still. "What for?" "Well, your friends over there, they made a bet with us, and they lost." "What bet? And what does that have to do with me?" "These guys, they bet they would beat at football, and they lost. So they owe us." At this, Beam let out a strangled yell. "We didn't make the bet! Yoli, you made the bet!" She lost her patience. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" Joe spoke up. "Here's the thing. Your Yuli couldn't resist our bet, but now we won. It's time for us to collect our prize. And for that, we need you," he continued. Yoli was so sure they were going to win. So sure. That's why he agreed on our terms. He said if we won, you would kiss me on the mouth. "Don't be stupid, Joe. This is not funny. I'm not going to kiss you." "Oh, I just offered to bet. Your boyfriends were the ones who accepted, so now you have to fulfill their promise."
They basically used her as collateral. And I wonder, do girls ever think of using boys as collateral like that? So it is sort of like a weird entitlement that, oh, she's kind of one of us, but at the same time, she won't mind. She's just taking one for the team. And then, oh, kenapa kau tak cool? Be cool lah. Benda ni, I've heard that a lot of times. People go like, oh, just chill lah. Why are you overreacting over something? As though women are hysterical creatures.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it comes back to the whole idea that women don't own their own bodies, which I think it's just such an insidious idea, because it kind of feels like it's okay to let somebody just kiss you even if you don't like it, which is why I think there's this idea that if somebody wants to come around and cuddle you, or if they want to come and play with you, or want to change your clothes, and want to give you pretty dresses and everything, that's actually quite creepy in a way, I feel, because you should never teach young girls that it's okay that other people treat them like a doll, and that's where it starts, I feel.
And then of course, if something happens to you, right, if you were harassed, and they are blamed. They are blamed. Like, oh, why are you looking at me in that way if you didn't want it? Or why are you wearing such a tight skirt if you didn't want to be harassed? Victim blaming is a huge thing in society, where they go like, what, she was acting like a floozy, so what does she expect?
It's just like in the story, right? Like Draupadi she was treated like she was it was her fault because she hung around with boys, and the first thing that she was wondering about was whether or not people are going to believe her. And she's kind of developed this reputation, unwarranted and undeserved reputation for being easy just because she hung around with the boys. Which, if you think about it, that's basically everything that girls are afraid of all the time. That's the kind of thing that we protect ourselves against because, we know how important that reputation is. Once you lose that, then you're free for all. Like, it's anything that happens to you, that's on you. Nobody else is going to speak up for you.
Yeah, and she felt very disloyal to report her friends. Like I think that was also it because she kind of cared about her friends, and also to kind of come to the realization that they don't care about her in that way. Yeah, I mean, like I really kind of felt for her in this story because it feels like this is kind of like what you call coming of age, right? Where you realize that wow, the world that I live in is not the world that I thought it was, and like the people that I really thought would look out for me are the ones that are actually like causing me all this pain. It brings us to the last story we want to discuss today, which is called An Epic Misunderstanding. And this is quite an intense story because this is about arranged marriages. And I always find it quite incredible that in this day and age, people still accept arranged marriages, but it's actually quite normal. It's actually quite normal in our society. And even in like the diaspora, right? If you talk about like even the Malay, Indian, Chinese diaspora all over the world, they still have this. You want to marry somebody from your same culture. And it has this sort of like idea that parents always feel that they know what's best for you.
Arun Singham, she reminisced. That man could make your heart do things that even an Olympic gymnast couldn't do. They loved each other. They were a perfect couple. Arama and Sita matched everyone had called them. Her family had other plans. Apparently, money was everything. Even before she knew it, she was signed, sealed, and delivered to the Lingam house to be the wife to the eldest son. Her freedom had ended the day she finished university and came home. An excellent proposal, they said. They're a renowned family. Nothing but the best given to those in their household. She would be treated like a queen, even better than how she was treated in her father's house. They didn't even have to pay a large sum for her dowry to marry her off. First, she fought. Finally, she relented. They told her that they only wanted what was best for her. They were older. They knew how to make the best decisions. They loved her. She could not put her family in shame. Her marriage was orchestrated by her parents because they felt that they knew better.
I think it was not long ago that I had this really quite interesting conversation with some people about, the whole idea of arranged marriage. And I think it's probably in the generation before ours, like not quite our generation, but they still were the ones that considered arranged marriage to be kind of like, like a little bit better than a love marriage. Like the whole idea is that love isn't something that is reliable. And I don't know, there was still some debate about whether or not it was better to have a love marriage or an arranged marriage. And I think to some extent, the conversation nowadays would no longer be whether or not it's better to have an arranged marriage or a love marriage, but maybe even the whole idea of what marriage actually is. Like, is it even really necessary to be married anymore? Just the whole idea that everyone must get married is already something that is so loaded. Because we know so many people don't want to get married, and that they have really good reasons for why they don't want to get married.
Yeah, and it also puts this sort of like ticking clock on a woman, right? Because you seem to have, these are the best years of your life. So if you're going to have a child, you better get married by this age or else you'll be an old mom. And I guess what really came across to me in this story is that how horrible her mother-in-law is. And her mother-in-law is a woman. So how she raised her son to expect certain things from his wife, how she put a lot of pressure on her daughter-in-law to have a son. If you think about all these things, is that she would have experienced this herself when she was a young wife. And yet she does the same thing. So that's the heartbreaking part about it. It's like on one hand, like the protagonist's mother, who probably had an arranged marriage herself, cannot see like the fact that perhaps this is not the best thing for her daughter, and her mother-in-law treats her horribly because she felt that she was not good enough for her son. I know that, like, again, you're making a villain out of a woman, but at the end of the day, right, you hear so many of these stories. I've had friends who are in marriages, happy marriages, but have a lot of stress from their in-laws. Because there's always the, oh, you know, I wasn't like this. I could have done better. Oh, you want to have career, is it? You know, so again, like the pressure that women put on other women as well, it is actually quite apparent in a story like this. You know, like everybody means well, but at the end of the day, she is the one that has to live with all the decisions that other people made for her. This is like on her side. You don't see this story like her husband going through this difficulty.
Yeah, usually the guy in the middle, he's like, oh, you know, like I'm going to just step out of this. If my mother and my wife are going to fight each other, it's got nothing to do with me.
Don't want to get involved.
When you're the one, when you're the one who has to make the peace, you're the one that matters. You know, if you spoke up for your wife, you could probably make your mother respect her a lot more. And what you were saying about, you know, like this mother being conditioned by the patriarchy, that is a problem. This is pervasive custom that we have in place that everyone must conform to. So like, you know, I've had to go through the system, and therefore, you know, whoever comes after me, that's the system you live under. Sorry, I can't do anything about it. You know?
I turned out fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I had to get through it, so you better learn. You know, that kind
This
of
is
thing,
the way
right?
life is, you know, you can't have everything, right? And then always like, you know, like then you have circumstances where a person gets married for love and then the marriage doesn't work out, and then they go like, see, you married for love? Also don't work out, what? So, again, I'm not saying that we're against arranged marriage, because I think there's a lot of very good marriages out there that were originally arranged, because sometimes people do find it hard to meet the right person as well. And it's true. If you're the kind of person who feels that your family is always going to be involved in your life, you want, I guess the Malays call it restu ibu, right? You want the restu of your parents. So it is that kind of interesting balance. But it's just interesting to see that a lot of the times it's the women that bear the brunt.
We still have an older generation that is very much hung up on this idea that marriage is the way to secure your future, right? Whereas with the advent of modern age, more women are realizing that you don't actually need to rely on a man. You don't really actually need to have this family structure in this institution of marriage in order to feel secure. I don't think that women are actively rejecting marriage.
No.
Nobody actually wants to be alone. You know, a lot of people enjoy companionship. A lot of people enjoy feeling the sense that somebody else is there for them. But it's just the idea that we have to have somebody there just because they're male and we're female. That no longer flies with most people.
You're hoping that if you do get married, it is more of a meeting of equals. That's what you really want, right? When we talk about gender equality, you want that equality in your partnerships, in your relationships. Let's
wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. So these stories might not necessarily paint all women in a favorable light, but it does put the female narrative center stage. And when it comes to books, we feel it is important that the first step is in framing newer and more inclusive narratives. Books like this are great for would-be writers among students. The short story format is a really great format to get yourself, writing about stuff. So maybe you might want to write your own short story. Put a woman at the center of your story. And you can enter.
I would challenge boys to do this as well, because I think it's easier for girls. It's actually very easy for a girl to imagine a boy's voice, because that's in all the stories we read. But if you really want to challenge yourself, boys, and see how creative you are, put a girl at the center of your story and see whether you can actually put yourself into her head.
Yeah, you can create your own version of a princess based on a folk tale, but how would you like that princess to be? Or just, it could be a cook in the palace. Maybe you might want to write about a cook in a palace and see what she's doing. And so you can do this. You can write a story. We can put a response to this podcast on any of our social media platforms and join our competition. It's now extended to the end of April 2022. And don't forget to hashtag Literature for Equality contest, and the entry form is on our website
rngdr.com/LFE.
Yes, that's where our competition.
You'll find all the details for the contest, and you can find all the episodes of this whole series, as well as materials for in-class discussions and activities.
Yep. And why not pick up a retelling or look out for Southeast Asian folklore or contemporary stories? Zancho's Blackwater Sister is a contemporary story about a girl coming back from living overseas and how she has to deal with aunties but also things of the supernatural ilk. If you want something middle grade, Hannah Alkaf's Girl and the Ghost is a great story about a girl that her best friend is a palisade. So, you can actually listen to our conversation with Hannah Alkaf on her book Girl and the Ghost in Season 3, Episode 20. So check it out.
In Season 4, Episode 17, we had a great conversation with Lauren Marino, who wrote Women Who Wrote. They chronicle about all these women who wrote down stories, and many of them actually made history, but it's probably been erased by the mist of time. And we have also spoken to Aishah, whose podcast Seek to Speak gives opportunities for girls to express themselves.
Indeed. This is episode 7 for TBNT's Literature for Equality project, supported by the Canadian Fund for Local Initiatives. Do listen to the other 7 episodes in this series. We discuss some really excellent books.
You have been listening to Diana Yong and Hani Ahmad. Thanks for listening.
Bye.